So, let's talk about Nepal. Right there, in the heart of the Himalayas, a pretty radical transformation is underway. And it's not about building taller mountains. No, it's about building a digital nation from the ground up. This is a story about a government's massive dream, and the, well, unexpected way that dream is actually being built.
And this, right here, is the central puzzle we're going to unpack. On one hand, you have the official government plan, a big 33-page document laying out this grand vision. But on the other hand, you have the reality on the ground, these super fast-paced, 2-month courses that are literally churning out the tech workers who are building it. So the big question is, how does a nation possibly bridge the gap between a paper plan and a practical workforce?
All right, so first up, let's dive into the dream itself, the government's official blueprint. This whole thing kicked off way back in 2015, when Nepal laid out this massive policy document detailing exactly what its digital future was supposed to look like.
And the ambition here, it was absolutely staggering. This wasn't about small, incremental upgrades. The official goal was to fundamentally transform the entire country into an information and knowledge-based society and economy. For any nation, let alone Nepal, that is a monumental undertaking.
But, this wasn't just flowery language or a vague vision. Nope, the government actually put some hard numbers on the table, specific, measurable targets they were aiming to hit by 2020. And that made the dream something everyone could actually be held accountable for. So first up was infrastructure. The goal was to get a whopping 90% of the population online with broadband. Now think about that. In a country literally defined by the Himalayas, just running the cables for that is a monumental challenge. But of course, access doesn't mean much if people can't actually use the tools, right? So the second major target was all about people, getting 75% digital literacy across the entire country.
And finally, we get to the economic piece of the puzzle. The plan aimed for the tech sector to make up 7.5% of the nation's GDP. This showed they saw this not just as a social project, but as a core engine for future growth.
Okay, so you've got this incredible vision, you've got these clear targets, but there was one massive hurdle standing in the way, a problem that could derail the entire project. You see, you can't build a digital nation without digital builders. And here's what's really fascinating to me. The policymakers, they knew this. They saw it coming. Buried right there in their own policy document is the admission of this exact problem. They explicitly stated that specific measures were needed to develop the right human resources targeting critical skills. They basically identified their own biggest weakness.
And it's amazing how specific the policy was about what was missing. They were calling for courses that actually kept up with technology, for skills the market was demanding, for real connections between schools and companies, and access to global certifications. They basically wrote the perfect job description for a new kind of training, but they didn't know who would actually show up to do the job.
And that brings us to the next chapter of this story. Because with the government calling out the problem so clearly, a solution started to pop up. And not from some government committee, but from the private sector. A whole new class of schools stepped up to answer the call. So what are these? Well, they're called IT institutes, and they operate on a totally different model than what you'd see in a traditional university. Their whole focus is on teaching practical, job-ready skills in these super intensive 2 to 3 month programs. So forget 4 years of abstract theory. This is all about getting your hands dirty and getting a job, fast.
And just like that, a whole ecosystem of these institutes started to emerge. You've got established players like Broadway Infosys, specialists like Genesis Cloud that are focused on cloud tech, and innovators like Tech Access building their own job portals. But to really get how this model works, we're going to look inside the top-ranked institute, Skill Shiksha, which has made a name for itself with modern teaching methods and a pretty bold promise, a guaranteed internship.
So the big question is, how does a place like Skill Shiksha actually build a tech professional in just a couple of months? Well, it all comes down to a very specific, results-oriented process.
For every student who walks in the door, the journey starts right here. It's all about moving from that chaotic feeling of what do I do next to having a clear, direct path toward a real career.
And their method is actually a really clear 4-step process. First, it all starts with clarity, creating a roadmap so students know exactly where they're going. Then, the core of everything is learn by doing. We're talking hands-on projects, not boring lectures. All along the way, they're getting mentored and supported. And it all leads to that final step, building a real-world portfolio that acts as undeniable proof of their skills to employers.
And if you look at the courses they offer, the curriculum is built around one single question. What does the job market need right now? This isn't abstract computer science. They're teaching things like full-stack development for building websites start to finish, Python for data, digital marketing, data analytics, and cybersecurity. These are the jobs that are open today.
So what's the secret sauce here? What makes this model actually work? Well, it seems to be a combination of a few key things. The training is built around real projects. It's taught by instructors who actually work in the industry. The curriculum is constantly being updated to match the market, and they offer flexible schedules and direct job placement support to just remove as many barriers as possible.
Okay, so this is the moment where the two big threads of our story, the government's grand plan and the private sector's on-the-ground training, finally come together. Let's connect the dots between that policy written in 2015 and the practical skills being taught today.
And right here, you can see this direct line from that abstract policy document to what's actually happening in the classroom. When the government said, hey, we need to promote e-commerce, the market answered with digital marketing courses. When the plan called for developing the IT sector, these institutes started creating programs for building complex web applications. The government basically identified the destination, and these schools started building the cars to get there. It's an almost perfect symbiotic match.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it seems a government can absolutely set the direction. They can write that ambitious plan and really articulate the vision for a modern digital nation. But that plan, it's just the start. That vision is ultimately built not in government buildings, but in classrooms, through focused, practical, hands-on training that gives people the actual skills they need to construct that digital future.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on, doesn't it? Could this be the new model for national development? A powerful combination where the public sector sets the grand vision, and the private sector, driven by ambition and market needs, actually paves the road to get there. It's a compelling idea for sure.